Good morning, everyone. So I know most of you in the room, and most of you will understand that what Stuart's just described as the perfect storm and this perfect situation to run a symposium at probably has left me a little bit nervous today, because you won't be surprised to know this is the first time I've talked about global economics to a crowd. So yeah, we were looking at the later life borrowing landscape, but what we're going to try and do is give you, because I am clearly not a renowned global economist, what we're going to try and do is give you the more to life take on the current situation that we face. So I am Director of Manufacturing and Advisor Propositions. My job is, most of you will know, I've only been here about sort of 5 months. My job is to try and be that bridge between our operations teams, our sales teams, and of course yourselves, the customers. So that's my job, and today we'll try and position ourselves as somebody that can give you information that you can go away and use with your customers. I hope you forgive me, I've got a few notes for today. I don't normally use notes in a presentation, but given that I'm covering off economics and all such things as the budget and the war, which clearly are things I not speak about on a daily basis necessarily, I am going to use a few notes, which is unusual for me. So when it comes to the current volatility that we're all hearing about in the news, the age-old dynamic of supply and demand is basically the kind of thing that you need to know. Anything that is in short supply and high demand, the cost goes up, and we understand that, whether that be a car or a jewel or anything else. Sterling, the dollar, all of these things, they work in exactly the same way. Certainly nobody here at More to Life, although we have some very educated people, we have an actuary in our business as well. None of us have a crystal ball. And in fact, I was speaking to Richard earlier, who'd spoken to a couple of renowned economists just recently, I think, who basically commonly said, anybody that tries to predict what's going to happen over the next 6 to 12 months, doesn't probably really know what they're talking about, because you can't understand unless you have a crystal ball. If I did have a crystal ball, I'd use it for this week's lottery numbers. Put my feet up, and I wish you all well from the Caribbean somewhere. Okay, so what's been happening? Money supply, money chain issues, the war in Ukraine, pressure on the sterling, all topics that slip off the top of my tongue. So there's been a sell-off of government bonds. What does that mean to equity release world? And that's what I'm going to try and do, is relate the stuff that you hear on the news to equity release world, okay? So there's been a sell-off of government bonds. As the price falls in the bond market, so the yield goes up. Why is that important to equity release? We'll come to that. The US put their rates up far quicker than we did in the UK, all right? And that's because of the type of inflation that's going on as far as we're concerned for our country. And again, that's something I'll cover off. So try and put some meat on the bone to some of the stuff that you hear on the news. So with the strengthened dollar, that puts pressure on the pound. And why is that important? Well, oil is priced in dollars. So when the price of oil goes up, so the cost of our goods go up, because there's oil in so many of our goods, whether that's a plastic item or whether that's an item that's a clothing that's being moved around the world. You have to remember that funders are at a T-junction. They are always at a T-junction. Funder comes to a T-junction and says, I have all of this money to invest, whether I'm a pension fund or whatever. I've got all this money to invest. I can turn left and invest in government gilts. And I can invest that money. I can put £500 million in, nice, easy, one-off transaction, low cost, low risk. I know exactly when I'm going to get my money back, and I know exactly what my return is going to be. Or alternatively, I turn right and I get involved in this equity release, okay? It's going to cost me more to get my money out there. It's quite tricky. There's a level of risk. I don't know whether Mr. and Mrs. Miggins are going to last 2 years or 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. So I don't exactly know when I'm going to get my money back. All I know is the interest rate that's going out. So there has to be something called a hurdle rate. There has to be, for that extra risk, for that extra concern that pension fund might have, or that investor might have, there has to be a difference between the guaranteed rates that they can get from the government and then the more risky business of equity release. And that hurdle rate is why you've seen the interest rates go up so strongly, not just in mortgage world, but also in equity release world. And our world of equity release is no different from those mortgages that are also going up. Again, something I'll cover off. On the news, you'll hear all about the dollar and how that's strengthened against the pound. But what you don't hear about is the ruble. And this is something I found out in the last 24 hours in my research about global economics. The last time that the ruble was as strong as it is currently today was 2014. which is when Russia went into Crimea. So now you can start to see how global economics and how these things that you hear about on the news impact in the real world. It was trading, the ruble was 5p. Ruble equal 5p, it's now at 15. So when you think about the dollar strengthening against the pound, actually when you look at that difference, you can see why Russia might be considering to do the things that it does, and how those things, those actions, will have implications in the real world. Foreign investors are looking at sterling and they think it's too risky. So that's why they put the rates up. We haven't been as fast as the US to put their rates up. They did it earlier and they did it stronger. And whenever the US catches a cold, sneezes, sorry, should I say, we catch a cold. We're a couple of months behind, but that's, if you start to look at what's going on, you have to understand why that is. So we have to put interest rates up to strengthen the pound against the dollar. Anybody that's been on holiday in the US, in fact, I was just overhearing a conversation here, it's quite an expensive business right now. And of course, that affects both your imports and your exports, whether you're the UK or whether you're the US. So then we've got the energy cap. The energy cap stands to potentially cost the government £100 million. Now, to put that into real terms, because £100 million, or whatever, 100, should I say, billion pounds, £100 billion. The state pension costs roughly £100 billion a year. The NHS costs roughly £200 billion a year. So that's half the cost of the NHS, or the cost of the NHS pension, roughly, depending on what happens. You can see that that kind of cost, straight off the back of COVID, is going to have a massive impact. And it's going to create this volatility that we're seeing. This is risky. And of course, the government is borrowing, and that creates more risk and more issues and more concern. They launched a budget with no explanation, which created a lack of confidence in the government, more instability, more volatility. Keir Starmer has put his team on an election footing, not necessarily being advertised, but we believe that that's the case. The Bank of England are buying gilts to stop defined benefit pensions from collapsing. More instability. It's a bit doom and gloom, isn't it? It's pretty doom and gloom. I'm sorry about that. We are going to come to some good stuff. This is your gilt yields. So if you want to know, again, coming back to that T-junction, I'm turning left, I'm investing in gilts, I'm turning right, I'm investing in equity release. This is what's happened to the gilt yield. Is it any wonder that the cost of our products have increased? But it's important that you take this back to your customers. It's important that you take some of this information back. There are two types of inflation. There's demand pull inflation and cost push. Traditionally, governments put interest rates up to curb inflation. But that inflation will come from high spending. So demand pull inflation comes from high spending. That's me going out and buying a car. It's me having spare money in the pocket. So I'm buying a car, going on holiday, spending more on takeaways, doing all that kind of stuff. And then you've got cost push, which is where we are right now, which is why putting interest rates up isn't necessarily the right thing to do if you just looked at why rates were going up. The cost of the pound, where it is, the cost of our goods, the cost of gas, the cost of oil, we're not spending money on cars, holidays and stuff in the same way. This is being forced on us. So this is high cost, not high spending of our goods. Putting interest rates up too high potentially breaks the country. It breaks you and I with mortgages. Okay? So it's a real tricky knife edge that this government is on, that the Bank of England is on, frankly, anybody who works in financial services is on. Again, supply and demand. Brexit, Labour, COVID, we've got major issues. The cost of labour has increased. The cost of labour within our business here at More to Life and Key Group in general has increased because you can't get cheap labour in because of Brexit, because you can't get the cheap labour in. Tesco's are prepared to pay more to stack shelves, which means that people that want to employ people in offices need to pay more. More inflation. COVID, huge cost. Ridiculous, off the scale cost. Up to 20% of the world's goods stuck in China, unable to get out of ships over the last couple of years. Okay, I'm a cyclist, can't go over any cycling stuff. So the cost has gone up. Supply and demand, once again, coming back to supply and demand. If we look at the normal mortgage rates, HSBC 2-year rate 5.99 yesterday, 5.59 for a 5-year fixed. So the good news is that whilst we are in this massive period of volatility and uncertainty, the really good news is the markets are saying this is a blip. The storm will pass at some point. So I think we can take some strength and some kind of comfort in the fact that the markets are saying that whilst interest rates are likely to be high and likely to go a little bit higher still, the reality is that actually the long-term view is that we'll see a correction. So what does all this mean for equity release? Finally back into my comfort zone. Right. There has been a reduction in products. You'll all be aware of some of the products that have disappeared and some of the lenders that have disappeared. Remember the T-junction. Just continually remember that T-junction. Why have these products disappeared? Because frankly, the deal with government bonds and gilts is looking stronger right now. So actually as a funder, I'm thinking actually I'll take that deal over there instead. So we do have that risk-reward situation. And funders are looking at that. And some of them have temporarily removed themselves from the market because they can get a better deal. Doesn't mean they won't be back. And quite frankly, I've been in this sector since 1998. And if at one point you told me there were 447 products available in this market space, I'd have absolutely, well, I don't know what I'd have done. I'd have fainted probably. Okay, I was trying to think of something polite then. But that was unbelievable. There was a time when I sourced equity release products as an advisor and there were 2, 3, 4 options. So I hardly think we're in a bad place. I don't think we're in a bad place. The annoying thing, the really, really annoying thing, as a fan of this sector as I am, I love this sector, I love what we do, I love the outcomes that our products and our advice give to Mr. and Mrs. Miggins somewhere, wherever they are in the country, and how that transforms their lives. I'm very, very, very passionate about what we do. The really flipping annoying thing is that we just got this huge growth in our sector, and Brexit came along and everybody said house prices were going to collapse, so it caused a lack of confidence in the sector, and it stifled our growth. Then obviously COVID, and now this. Every time I think we're on this major run up, something affects our sector. But clearly, the first 2 quarters of the year were fantastic. And if I can look at more to life figures and our best estimates of the market, Q3 is going to look fantastic too. Q4 things might just cool a little bit because of the change in consumers and how they're going to work, how they're thinking, maybe considering those higher rates. If we look at the later life lending market, it's huge. Equity release is still only a very, very small part of the overall borrowing market. So equity release still has its place to play, whether it be coming in at 5 or 6 billion. And there's still an awful lot of opportunity out there for financial advisors and for manufacturers. And if we take a quick snapshot of the over 55s and the debt situation, these are the drivers for growth, okay? If we look at it, we've got 402 billion by 2032, an increase of 61% in just 15 years. So debt levels are looking to continue to grow. And if you look at the charts, 2032 is the peak of the IO problem. Nearly 40% of retired households have said that their monthly expenditure exceeded their monthly income at least sometimes during this year, again up 16%. I don't think any of us in the room will be surprised about that. The total amount of equity release per year is expected to increase by 77% between now and 2032. I think that's conservative, personally. And then, of course, we've got the increased cost per month. Again, I still think that's conservative because I know what my gas and electricity bills have gone up by. All right, and if you're on a fixed level of income, that's going to cause you a major issue. Again, a driver for growth. But that's where we'll start to see the demographic, a type of client that we see change. If we look at H1 versus H2, okay, total lending in the market, year on year up 36%. But further advances and drawdowns are massive. Some of you have struggled with further advances and drawdowns, getting the right level of service from providers. I can tell you within More to Life, in the last 3 months, I think we've seen a doubling in the amount of further advances and drawdowns business that we do. A doubling in 3 months. It's not easy to keep up with. You've got to recruit people, you've got to train people, you've got to improve your systems, something we're doing, spending a lot of money on. But when something doubles like that, it's a real difficult thing to keep up with. That team in our further advance and drawdown department kind of had 2 people, 4 people, 8 people, 16 people, potentially 24 people in order to cope with the demand next year. And the changing nature of how people are using these loans and what people need to do with these loans, this is all changing. More customers are using equity release to pay down mortgage debt. This is an ever-increasing thing, and until 2032 it will continue. The average size of the loan that's being used has gone up 10,000, so as a percentage rate that's quite high, and we expect that to increase because as the later IO mortgages mature, so house prices were higher, so therefore the average IO mortgage will be higher, so therefore the average opportunity for you to go out there and advise your clients is going to get greater in terms of size. And then we look at the changing nature of later life debt. The concern for me is that women still struggle in terms of pensions. Most of your clients, if a person is going to be single and taking out equity release, the chances are it's a widow, not a widower. So she's just lost the husband's pension, or most of it, okay? And the cost of living is going up. These customers are going to need advice. Some of them will be vulnerable. And we've got people here to talk about vulnerability. Of course, we've got experts in the room today. Some of those customers might be vulnerable, they might be older than we've been seeing, because of course we've seen the average age of our customers go down as the demographic changed. So when we actually look at that disparity, that needs to be kind of protected against. So these are the drivers for growth. Unfortunately, some of it's going to come from volatility. Not all of that is going to sit comfortably with us. We've got the cost of living crisis that is continuing to cause a problem and will get worse. We've got the need for bank of mum and dad more than ever before. And particularly if house prices drop and there's a bit of a correction, there'll be a lot of families wanting to get their kids onto the property ladder. Probably, if it was me and my children, I probably wouldn't be doing it right now, okay, in terms of gifting to my kids. But what I would be thinking about is, okay, when there's a stability in the interest rates and house prices have maybe dropped a bit, is that the time I get my children or my grandchildren onto the property ladder? And then, of course, we've got debt repayment. Now, these complex matters in volatile times mean that your advice is more necessary, more important than ever before. This sector is going to need to deliver careful recommendations, prudent releases. It's no longer a no-brainer for high net worths. Never before has advice been needed, quality, top quality advice been needed. Never before has it been needed more than now. And like all storms, this storm will pass, and this sector will prevail without any doubt. On my last slide, I just want to talk about more to life and what we're doing. Support and communication. When I was at another lender and we went through COVID, I won't say I was jealous. I was very, very envious of what More to Life did in terms of communication. Advisors across the country told me that I needed to be better and I needed to be more like More to Life. We've had our challenges this year because we've delivered huge volumes of lending with fantastic products, low interest rates, fantastic flexibility, market-leading ERCs. We've done an awful lot to try and prop up this sector with great products. Has created some issues at times with how fast we could deal with that demand. Just like tickets for a Robbie Williams concert, they're very popular. You're going to have to do something like get up early and get online and try and get them early, because it's hard, because it's in demand. So our products have been very, very similar. But as a lender, we are very, very lucky to have multiple funders that will create stability. We want to be that beacon of stability for this sector. A couple of our funders have taken a cautious look at the market right now. We still have 4 funders. We've got funders who are international reinsurers. We've got funders who are UK pension scheme. We've got funders that are not restricted by Solvency II, which will deliver you the higher LTVs to help those IO customers. So that's what we'll continue to do to the best of our ability. We're going to continue to supply great products, flexible products, and continue to work on service whilst our volumes are high. But what I will say is this. The last time interest rates were this high, the products were not this good. Flexibility wasn't there, repayments weren't there, fixed ERCs weren't there, these LTVs weren't there. So we still have fantastic products and a great opportunity to talk to our customers and deliver great outcomes. I wish you good luck over the next few months. I think we're all going to need it. We'll strap ourselves in, but it will pass. And we will prevail as a sector, and we will continue to give great outcomes to consumers. And that's me done. Thank you very much.